Morning, everyone, and welcome back to the second week on biblical apologetics. Okay, we'll continue our study on the defense of Christian belief. Okay, so this is somewhere we left off. We'll review a little bit and then continue on the concept. When we do any particular lesson or study on particular subject, as a student, and in this academic world, school, student, teachers, scholars, when we are tackling or studying any topic and subject, always it is important to identify and understand the terms, the concepts. So it is a must, especially when you're dealing with a new subject such as apologetics. Many of you may not be even not interested in this subject, but no, it is required, and you're taking it for the reason. So when we do study again any subject, it is important to understand the terms and the meanings of every key words that are used. So we are doing that to begin our study of apologetics. This is it's a master level class, but part of us, you guys are not in the master program and in the college level. So I'll try to do help you to understand and begin on the basics of apologetics, which requires and demands much of the work on helping you to understand the concepts. And rather than focusing on how to do the apologetics or going into the real topic of apologetics, such as existence of God, the messiahship of Jesus Christ, and the work of the Holy Spirit, and these things, and also, of course, the mechanism and dynamic of salvation. If you're doing apologetics, that's the main topics that you try to defend. Not only to defend, actually, to explain what it means to be saved with the grace and such. But instead, before we actually go into those topics, those are going to be the last topics that we will actually cover. But before doing that, my job here today is try to help you to understand, and also how, not only in the field of theology, if you are doing any studies, and actually these principles of the studies that I'm trying to help you with today, and then of course in the next lessons, is also applicable, meaning it does have use. You can use them in your daily life, especially when you're dealing with this modern world, which is very diverse. I know many of us who are from the countries that you represent here, whether it's China or some part of Muslim world. I know some of us are from Turkey, and China, Vietnam. And as we grew up in those countries, usually these countries that I mentioned, including South Korea, of course, when I was a student, and you have only one good value and idea, the government or the culture try to tell you this is the right thing to believe. But today, as we know, it's very diverse, and there are many different values. And even in America, for example, only like 20, 30 years ago, you are not to really, boast about being LGBTQ, and not anymore. So there are very fast and sudden changes in the value system. That means even if you grew up in the countries where the culture and the government and politics tell you what to believe, now you have freedom and opportunity to make that your own decision to believe on certain things. So that means your belief may change, because not only you grown up, but you're in a different world. You're in America. So facing those challenges, these the principles and the concepts will help you to make a proper and good decision. Again, I'm not here to try to force you any belief. That's not my job. I'm trying to so-called evangelize, but it is my job and duty as a professor and teacher, and also as a believer in the Bible, try to help you to present what I believe or what we believe as a believer and Christian, and you see, look into it, because you made the decision to enroll in this school and also come into this particular class, and I'll try to help you to present at the best what the Christianity is teaching. So the core doctrine or belief, and then tells you how to process, help you how to process such challenges, such beliefs when you face them. So continuing on that, so every idea and belief in the world, they are controversial. Whether it's a Greek mythology or findings in modern science or archaeology and astronomy or physics, biology, in any field of the study, even in the modern science, they do have controversies. Meaning, one can say this is the truth, and the other can say, no, it's not. This is the truth. Or one can say this is a fact. Fact is something that is solid by definition. But others can say, no, that's not the fact that I know. This is the fact. So you can argue against one another because they each have different beliefs. Unless you're living in North Korea somewhere, and you are taught to believe certain things from when you're, babies, and you grew up in that world, and you have no opportunity and possibility and channel to look into other world, then you just believe in one thing. But we are not living in that world, so there are always controversies and issues. Oops, what happened? Okay. Issues are what we call, again, problems. Problems because the world that we live in, the reality that we are in, nothing is perfect. You know that, and we know. So when nothing is perfect, that means there are issues and problems. Whether it's in your personal life, or your business, or your study, your family, your country, the government, the school, nothing is perfect. So that means it does have issues. Even us Christians do believe the Bible is a perfect presentation of God's given message. Being said that, because it is written and copied throughout the thousand years of time, when men make copies of certain things, papers, even though you are trying to be perfect, still you do make mistakes. So, that means even the scripture, the Bible, they do have certain issues that are challenged. We do have some Muslim friends in this class, and Muslims, you believe the Quran is perfect. The same principle with the Bible. Yet, when you look at it, you may have some questions and issues and problems as a person, as a believer. Even you as a believer in Christianity, or Buddhism, or Islam, whatever your faith is, there are issues and problems of your own. You may have some questions and doubts, and those are what we categorize as issues. So the apologetics, the defense of the belief, it deals with these problems and issues. And you try to do your best to make understand and make it reasonable. And you argue within yourself, and then once it is settled and understood, then you can argue with others. So that's what we are trying to do. Disagreement, of course, it comes with a controversy. So again, apologetic is a kind of communication, and when you do this communication in academic world, you are trying to be reasonable and rational. To do so, it is always necessary to present your support or evidence or proof. You can claim whatever you want to claim, but unless these claims are supported by proofs and evidences, those claims are just the same. You're saying it, and you have no credit for your own saying, and we do not believe on those things. It could be lies, it could be something that you made up, it can be a fake, you're trying to deceive someone. These are the category of lies, and we don't believe in lies. If you're a person with a sound mind and sound heart, then you do not believe in those lies. So to prevent us from believing in lies, especially in the field of religion and then belief system, you don't want to believe in lies. Think of someone believing in fake all throughout his or her life, and eventually find out that it's a lie. It's miserable, and we don't want to do that. Okay. Then to be reasonable, it has to be logical and also objective. That will be one of the key words that you want to keep in mind. If you're a Christian and if you're in this class learning apologetic as a believer, as a Christian, then something that I want to tell you is many Christians are subjective, meaning they say whatever you believe, and I'm gonna believe in this, and I don't need to explain that to you. But in fact, if you believe in something that is called truth, and if you believe in something that is reasonable and rational, which a Christian truth is, I believe, you are able to explain it in a way that another person may listen and say, I mean, it makes sense to you. But you decide whether to believe or you don't believe. So being subjective does not help, has to be objective. Objective means present the truth, the belief, the doctrine, Christian doctrine, in a way that sounds like you are speaking from a third person, even non-believer's position. So that's what objective is. Proof and evidence, I already talked about it. Continuing. Now, key elements. When we are doing apologetics, these are some of the elements that we need to be aware of or understand before even going into the logics of apologetics. First, it is about the cognitive, meaning as in there. If it doesn't make the sense in there in your brain, and then it's not going to work on your heart. That's how it works. You can be emotional and believe in something with your emotion. But later, eventually, it's going to cause the issues in your brain, your head, your intellect. Some Christians in the past, they ignored the intellectuals of faith or belief. Some religions today, for example, shamanism, it doesn't do any explanation in your brain, but it's something mysterious, and it's emotional, and it's about feelings, and so on. But good religion, if it's a religion, whether it's Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, every good belief system, it does have this dimension of intellect. So it does make sense in your head, your logic, your rational. Then it comes down to your heart. So heart and the knowledge has to come together to make a belief a proper and good belief. If your knowledge and your heart disagree, then we have issues. From my own experience, when a person grew up in, say, Christian family, Christian home, so you're born into a house where parents, mom and dad, both go to church, they believe in Christianity, Christ Jesus, and then you grew up there. That doesn't mean that you are going to you are a Christian. But when you grow up in that kind of home, then naturally you'll go to church every Sunday, and you listen to the Sunday sermon, and you go to Sunday school as a kid, children, and then you become a Christian. That's not a Christian in my definition. That's called nominal Christian. You're namely Christian, nominal believer. You don't really believe it, but you kind of in that culture, and you are cultured as sort of kind of believer. That happens in so-called Christian countries used to. There's, I mean, not today, there are not many so-called Christian countries. And if you grew up in like a Muslim countries, same thing may happen. But when you grow up and you become an adult, and your brain and your heart is saying different things, you have knowledge of that particular religion, but your heart does not agree. And then when that happens, it becomes a very serious issue. I know many of us here today is from China. And whether you're capitalist, communist, socialist, you grew up in that system. And the culture and the government and politics tell you what to believe. And you learn the knowledge from school about this ideology and its politics, the culture, and so on. But when you grow up, and there comes the time to ask yourself, have a big question about what you have been told to believe. This is the time when you begin your own apologetics. So apologetic is a kind of an argument and defense against what you've been told to believe versus what you think is possible and the truth. So there comes the time when you grow up, comes the time that the point of moment when you begin to doubt what you have been told. So in Christian apologetics, it's the same thing. As you grow as a Christian, like I told you, in a Christian home, and when you kind of begin to have your own self, and you begin to ask that very question, the doubting. I know this because I've been growing up. I'm a third generation Christian. My grandfather was a Christian from North Korea, came down to South during the Korean War, and then my father was a Christian, and I became a Christian later on. But it doesn't mean because you grow up in the third generation Christian home that you're a Christian. I thought so, but eventually I kind of found out that's not how it works, and I have to become a Christian myself with my own decision. And when you do that, you begin to doubt what you've been told. So that's the thing that we are trying to do. And next point, scientific. Many religions are forced, like I said, and people think they believe in certain things, but when you go back and then you know that you've been manipulated, brainwashed, and forced to believe in certain things because everyone believes the same thing, and then you kind of agree with the whole community, whole society, whole culture, and whole nation. That's not scientific. To be scientific, you go process of asking questions, whether this is true or not, whether this is right or wrong, whether this is a good or bad. When you ask that very question, it troubles you. So some people avoid to ask that question intentionally. They don't want to trouble themselves. But to grow up, to mature, to become a person, you need to ask those questions. And then you ask question, then you doubt, and you do the research, and then find the evidences. With the evidence and proof, you come to a conclusion. Then when you have that conclusion, whether you believe or you don't, that's where the stage, the belief comes in. So same thing happens with any field of science, natural science, like whether physics or biology or medicine. You go through that process. Same thing with the belief. Okay. Next, legalistic. Let's skip on that, and then from dialogue to debate. Good apologetics begin with a dialogue, and it should continue as a dialogue. Dialogue is two different parties, or even three, two parties or more, making the conversation or communication between these two different parties, trying to explain his or her position with the best logical, rational manner. That's a dialogue. So dialogue does not involve your emotion, or it does not, it should not involve your personality. So that's a way of doing a science in any academic institution, whether you're in school, whether you're in a research field. What you're going to do is to dialogue with others who believe in different things, who think the world is a little different than yours. So that's the dialogue. But eventually, it can become a debate. Debate is a little different because it may involve your emotions, your feelings, and your private and personal positions, and so on. And it kind of becomes a little fight. A fight, not physical fight, but fight with a word. That's a debate. So whether it's a dialogue or debate, these two forms of communication are both acceptable in the doing of apologetics. Okay. Continuing. Okay, goals of apologetics. When the reason and the goals that why we are doing apologetics in Christianity is for affirmation. Number one, affirmation. What it means by affirmation is when you believe in something, again, you have that stage or step to doubt. Is it true? Is it real? And me also as a Christian, there were times that I kind of doubted, is there really God? And the God of Bible. And unless you experience God with a very personal, strong experience of your own, that you will not have any true evidence to believe that there is a God that exists. So that's kind of a big question. And you need to affirm yourself that, you have to have that conviction that there is God, God of Bible. The God I know or God I experience is the God of Bible, because there are many different gods. Still, in shamanism, they believe in many different gods. And every culture, do have this shamanism based in their, embedded in their culture. So when I talk about shamanism, it may take a different forms, but we know there are many spirits that people worship, and those spirits actually exist. So you can believe in those spirits as God or gods, or you can believe in the God of the Bible. So when I say God, I'm speaking of God of Bible, and do not confuse. And I say God, it's a God with a big capital G, G-O-D. And affirmation is process. You are asking yourself the very same question that others or non-Christians ask you. For example, I mean, us Christians, we believe in the Bible. And the question ought to be, do you think the Bible is it really truly the Word of God? How do you know that the Bible is written by God? It's a human writing. So that was the question. And you as a Christian, if you don't have an answer to that very question, then you are in misknowledge or lacking knowledge, or you're in ignorance. So if you're ignorant, and if you think you're believing in something that you do not know, we don't say that is faith. It's a fake. You're faking yourself. You think you believe, but you are not actually. You don't believe in that. So you have to have knowledge, and then you make decision on that particular knowledge and bring it down to your heart, and the heart agrees, and it becomes the belief. So if you do not know anything here, but your emotion says, I believe in certain things, that's not what we call belief. That's an emotional reaction. So we need to be very accurate about this belief. So belief is a stronger and much different than your emotional agreement or feelings. So that's not what we believe, what we say believe. So affirmation is that process of confirming the knowledge that you have and asking yourself, do I really believe in this? And if you hadn't go through that process, whether you're Christian or Muslim or any other belief, then you need to do that as an adult, as a person. So that's your own responsibility as a human being and as a person who has the freedom and right, and then will and the knowledge that you need to do that. Confirmation. Confirmation is helping someone to affirm. So, let's say there's me, and there's another person who is going through that doubting stage, and I help that person to confirm. So that's what the confirmation is. So the goal of apologetics, second, is confirmation. Third, conversation. That is a good between ones who have different beliefs, different faith. Say, okay, I'm a Christian, and we have Muslim friends, and we kind of, talk about the God, the belief, and the heaven, and the hell, and the judgment and sin. Then we can go on in conversation. And probably the problem that we may disagree and may debate is the messiahship of Jesus Christ. And we can both agree that Christ is one of the great prophets, but is he really the Messiah? Then the conversation may stop there, but we can continue conversation, dialogue, but may not come to any conclusion. So that's what the conversation is. If you have different beliefs, apologetics try to present the Christian belief in a way that others can also listen and hear and try to understand. But conversation purpose is not to make someone to believe into your own religion or conversion. That's a very different thing. So conversation. Then defense. Defense happens when you are attacked. You are offended by others on your belief, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, faith. You can be offended and attacked, and then you are in position to defend your own faith, your belief. Even ideology. Then persuasion. As a Christian, if beyond the conversation is persuasion, meaning all Christians have duty and responsibility to help others to be saved. That means that's what the evangelism is. Evangelism, the reason and the purpose of evangelism is to convert others into your faith in Jesus Christ. So it's very aggressive and it's a very active way of presenting your belief. So in many Islam countries, the evangelism is not allowed. You are not to convert the Muslim into Christianity. And yet, the so-called missionaries go into those countries with the reason and the purpose and the goal of converting Muslim into Christian faith. So that's where the persuasion comes in. Persuasion has to be done in a very logical, rational manner. But in the past, like I mentioned in the last class, the crusade in the history, the crusade that is done against some of this Islamic state and the countries in the Middle Age, that's not persuasion, it's forced invasion. And we do, in Christian history, when we do study Christian history, we believe that has been a very bad decision by the church. And it has to be very personal and then mutual and horizontal, because in many cases, persuasion instead of persuasion is forced, because you have the power and the authority, then you force someone to believe in something, and that's not genuine belief, at least to my definition. So those are some of the goals of apologetics. Defensive and offensive. I'll just go very brief. So if you're in position to defend because someone attacks you, and then that's very passive, and that's defensive apologetics. But like I said, if you are going into this Muslim states, the Islamic states, countries, and try to do evangelism there, you are being very offensive, and and you're very being active. Next point, apologetic is a defender and an advocate for a particular position. If you're being a defender, then that's a passive apologetic. But if you're trying becoming advocate, meaning advertising and propaganda, if you're in that position, then you're doing very active apologetics. Okay, then there's a theological and doctrinal apologetics. Doctrinal apologetics happens within the Christian community. So that's within Christians. Christians trying to defend their own doctrine, because there are different doctrines depending on which denomination you are. For example, some believe in the the speaking of tongue, meaning there are two kind of tongues if you're a Christian. One that is called heavenly tongue, and there is another called earthly tongue. The tongue is speaking in the language or praying in the language that you never learned in your life. So if for example, I do speak Korean and English and some French, but say if I begin to pray in Arabic, all of a sudden that's going to be speaking in tongue. Some Christians believe it is still valid, and Christians can speak in tongue and pray in tongue because of the Holy Spirit. But some denominations do not believe in that. So that's the doctrinal difference, and that's doctrinal apologetics. Then theological apologetics is like non-believers or anti-Christians saying there's no God. Like Nietzsche, the philosopher, said God is dead. And you're trying to say and defend and explain God is alive. And that's kind of theological debate. And then when that happens, it's a theological apologetics. So basically two different concepts that are related. But we don't want to go deep into this because it's a very, professional thing. Then these are some of the things. I don't think it's anymore so much happening, but in 20 centuries, these are some of the things that Christians or Christianity had to face. Because 19th and 20th century, there was a very rapid and how do you say, good development in natural science. So as the natural science develops and they find out certain things that we have not known before. But if you go back a little bit further, Copernicus and Galileo both were the challenge to Christianity, even though they were Christians. And they're challenging the earth is round. And many at the time believed earth was flat. So when the science says earth is round, then they thought it's against the Christian religion, Christian faith. So that caused them to have this so-called academic controversies. Another good example of academic controversies is raised by Charles Darwin, as you know. He kind of suggested a theory that the animals develop itself because, for the reason of adaptation or the survival of fittest and so on, that it might be the case that we are not created as a natural process of such a development that resulted human being, which is dominant to other animals and plants. So that's kind of a theory that challenges Christian belief. And I mean, if you read the Bible begins with the story of creation. And it's very against the Bible in terms that it denies God or existence of God or God's involvement in us, our existence. And that's a very big theological challenge. So that's some of the examples of so-called academic controversies, including against natural science or challenge from natural science. And one of the big thing again is whether it's a creation or evolution. So many of us modern generation people who've been raised in the dominance of natural science believe that the evolution is a truth and the creation is a myth. So Christianity becomes a myth, and we Christians believing in myth, just like we believe in some of the stories in Greek mythology. No, so it becomes, from the level of truth, it becomes a myth, and the science becomes truth, or the natural science, to be correct. Natural science takes the place of truth. So you have a very serious question to yourself. If you're believing in the natural science or evolution, you need to seriously ask, is it true? Is it true? And so-called evidences for, the evolution is, for me, as a myth, just as much as they say the creation is a myth. Because you cannot prove, as a Christian and as a pastor and professor, I know that I can never prove the creation is true. You either believe or you don't. But the same thing, the evolution, the scientists never presented solid and good, consistent and coherent and total evidence for evolution. Never. If you study evolution seriously, you'll find it's still a theory. So it's a big myth as well. Next, against history. Because some of the things that the church did in the past, and still it goes on. And it's not only the past history. History continues as a present. Even in today, many things that happen within so-called Christianity or Christian church are evil. So we have issue. How can you defend this evil happening in the church? And if Christianity is the truth, and if it's good, God is good, why this evil happen in the church? And we are to answer, because the history does tell the church repeated evil after evil in the history. And it's not easy to do so, but the Apologetics, it does try to explain these things that are happened in the history. Okay, let's take a 10 minutes break, and let me have that attendance sheet back, and If you haven't signed it, just sign it before you take your break. Again, if you came last week, with your conscience, just sign it in and out for last week as well. On the against history. Christianity, as we know, in the history, been challenged by the natural science and by the history itself. And again, there are many things that church had done wrong and even evil. Like, for example, invading the South America by the Catholic Church, and they killed thousands and thousands of indigenous people, the local people, to invade. And then they did it in the name of God. I mean, as something that you be ashamed of, and it did happen. So many things have done by the church, in the name of church, in the name of God. Very terrible things happened in history, and it still happens, sadly enough, because history repeats itself. And because of that, we can safely conclude that humanity does not evolve or develop ethically, morally, and spiritually. It does cycle itself, going in a very big circle. That's what I believe. And against astronomy. As the science of astronomy develops, they do find out certain things. Okay. Now, they say the nearest system that is similar to solar system would be several thousand or millions light years away. Can you imagine million light years? The distance itself. I mean, you travel at speed of light for million years, and then you will eventually come to the nearest system that is pretty close to solar system. And at the end of the universe, we do not know how far that is, because you're even talking about billion light years. I mean, million is quite big, but billion light years, you travel billion years in the light speed, and you're still not at the end of the universe. That's a vast, So, astronomy, it speaks itself. You cannot imagine and study. I mean, astronomy only is able to study and reach the farthest, the how to say, the star of the solar system. Then archaeology. As you know, archaeology is study of ancient things. And also it has two dimensions. Some archaeological findings are against the Bible, but some archaeological findings prove that the Bible is true. So it has both sides. So that's why it's controversial. If it is cited to one side only, then you can say this is truth, and you should believe in this truth, because it's truth and fact. But the fact does say both, especially in archaeology, history, and astronomy, and even natural science. So that's why there are academic controversies regarding Christian belief and Christian claims and Christian things. Natural science, history, and astronomy, archaeology does not argue with doctrines that we believe. For example, the baptism or these things. But the theology, when it comes to theology, they do argue. For example, one of the good example is the virgin birth. Us Christians had to believe in the virgin birth of Jesus Christ through the Mary, who never knew the man but got pregnant and bore a child, and his name becomes Jesus, the Savior. So that's, scientifically speaking, that's not possible. That never happened in the history. That will never happen again in the history. And it's only once in history event. When something is only once in history event, you cannot prove or disprove. So it becomes the very issue the natural science says it never happened, it's not happening today, and it's not going to happen again in the future. If it's happening never, and then it's a myth, it's a lie, it's a made-up story. Again, resurrection. It's not doctrinal, it's a theological stuff. A man cannot come back to life once he or she is dead. Of course, there is many cases of what we call resuscitation. That's not resurrection. Resuscitation, those people who came back to life after that, some even a week, as far as I know, after a week of medically, clinically dead, and the person came back to life. And you cannot explain medically, they call that it's a medical miracle. So even in the field of medicine, they use the word miracle because they cannot explain those things. Resuscitation is beyond the science. Yet, when it comes to resurrection, because those who resuscitated, came back to life after death, medically speaking, they eventually die. When they get older and when their sickness come back, then they die. So that's resuscitation. But resurrection says once came back to life and not dead again. Jesus was lifted up to heaven, not experiencing that second death. And so that's resurrection, and the science, natural science, says that cannot happen. That's a myth. That's a lie. So that's what the natural science is, and we are to defend the resurrection. It is a fact, and it is truth. So that's where these things come in. So those controversies does exist, and either you believe or you don't. So there are two different arguments on one very subject. And then you need to take a position. I mean, if you don't take a position, then you are on the side that is negative. You cannot be neutral. Once you know it, once you hear it, you cannot be neutral. This is an issue in the Christianity, about the Christianity. When someone hears the statement saying that Jesus Christ is indeed God himself, his incarnate God, and he came to save the world, and everyone who believes in him will be saved and have eternal life. That's John 3:16. That's just one verse. But it's a very strong verse, a strong claim. Once you hear that, and then you know that you have enough knowledge about who Jesus Christ is, according to Christianity, and then you have to make a decision. You cannot be neutral. Either that is true or it is not. So you are being responsible as a person to make a very scientific, rational, and guessed decision about the information that you have received, because it has to do with your life. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you believe Nike is a better shoes than Adidas. I mean, it doesn't change your life. For some, yes, it would change. It matters a lot. But for most of us, whether you wear Nike or Adidas or some other brand, it's not going to matter so much. But when you are talking about the sin, life, death, and the eternal life, salvation, these things, that's very important subject and the key subject in your existence. Existence now and existence later. If there is. Then if the question becomes what we call this is one of the word that I'm going to repeat time after time in this class. The relevancy is the key to having processed the information that you hear, and if anything is relevant, it would cause you to have an implication. So anything, any information or the knowledge, it becomes relevant to you, then it would have produce or create the meaning, which demands your personal response to that. So you are to respond to these information that are important, and if it's important, it would be relevant. You can ignore, but that doesn't mean that it becomes irrelevant. So the decision for us as a responsible human being, you need to study seriously with a very good intention, and then make that decision whether that is relevant to you or not. Once it becomes relevant to you, and then it should produce an implication. So that's how we do the science, whether it's a psychological, whether it's physical, whether it's a spiritual. All these dimensions, 3 different dimensions, that physical, mental, and spiritual dimension, all requires you to respond scientifically, rationally, logically. If you do respond with the emotion, it will last as long as your emotions last. If you respond with the feelings, it's going to last as long as your feelings last. But your knowledge, it's not going to go away. It's going to last as long as you live. So knowledge comes in, and you're going to decide whether it's relevant or not, and then comes in the emotional feelings, and then your will is it acting on that particular subject and topic, the truth, the information, and you are deciding whether it's true or not. And once you decide that it is true, then it will have implication in your life. So that will change your life. That's how the religion works. And many think it's relevant, but doesn't make that implication. That's what happens in the church today. People sit there in the church and listen to the sermon, and they nod their head and make that agreement, yes, it is true. But once they go out of the church wall, church door, it does not change anything. And they think they are believers. I mean, God does save those people who just believe in that way, but he or she is not going to change the world. That's the problem with today's church, today's believer, I should say. And so make that implication. Ethical issues. Also, the Christianity is currently challenged with this ethical issues or moral issues. One of the example is abortion. This is one of the big political topics in America today. So usually the Democrats are for pro-life and pro-right of woman's right to have the decision on her own body. That's basically their argument is. And the Republicans are usually the ones who are pro-life. And then many Republicans will believe the abortion is sin and it's a murder and it should be abolished. So two different positions. And us Christians, some Christians do believe and right for a woman to decide. Yet, majority of evangelicals or conservative Christians believe that abortion is against God and God's teaching. So the Christianity and the church is challenged today to say and agree with the abortion rights. And we need to, us as evangelicals, to defend why the abortion is wrong ethically. If we say it's biblically wrong, then it wouldn't make any sense to those who do not believe. So the argument in our apologetics, in case of these moral issues, will say it's ethically, morally, humanly wrong. So that's how we develop the argument, instead of saying it's biblically wrong. For us Christians, I'm sitting in a church and teaching you as a pastor, I would say it's biblically wrong, and period. That's all I need to say. But for non-believers, then it requires different argument. So that's what we call base-up argument. And it is always important which base and the foundations you are talking to. If you are speaking in a different level, different basis, that the dialogue does not happen. So sometimes we need to lower the level of dialogue or foundation to ethical level rather than religious level or religious base. So that is a very important technique or the attitude or positioning for those who are doing apologetics. That happens to anything in your life. When you have an argument, first you see what your foundation and position is, and also see his or her foundation and position. If you're speaking from the different level or different domain or different interest of argument or dialogue, then it's never going to come to a conclusion because you're speaking from very different position. So first, you try to argue on the same level or same ground, so to speak. So this is one example. When you're arguing about the abortion let's speak it from the ethical point of view, or from the foundation of humanity. His humanity or her humanity definition might be different from mine. So begin with what is your definition or understanding of humanity? You ask the question, and then you hear it. Then if it's different, you try to make adjustment there. So that's kind of some of the techniques that we use when we are doing apologetics against non-believers. Gender issues, same thing. You know that President Trump prohibited any transgender athletes participating, especially the men who became woman by surgery, not to participate in any sports that is for women. So the reason basically for him doing it is because he bases his belief on the God had created man and woman, period. And no in between or no trans gender or anything of that nature. So that's how the conservative and evangelical Christians believe in these gender issues, but the world say otherwise, LGBTQ. So that's what their understanding of worldview regarding the gender. So they say you have your own right about your own body, and then you can make the decision whether you believe you are a man or a woman. It's about the belief. Even though you are born as a man, if you believe you're a woman, you can go to bathroom for the ladies and so on. That's the basically argument that they have. And the Christian believe that's not the case, and we are created either man and woman, and God has the very good reason for making that creation. And so those are some of the one of the ethical issues that we face in America today. I'm not sure if that's the case in other part of the world, but speaking of South Korea, as much as I know, it is a bigger issue than in the States. I mean, so having 25% Protestant population and another probably 20% plus Catholic population, which comes down to at least 50% of population are so-called Christians, Protestant plus Catholics, and still there is a big issue regarding both abortion and gender issues. Yet in Korea, these abortion and gender issues has not become a law yet. But the big trend for the majority of population, especially those what we call MZ generation, the younger 20 and 30, they believe in these general secular perspective on gender and abortion issues. This is very serious because the most extreme number of abortion that has been performed in Korea, South Korea, in 1 year came to almost million cases of abortion a year. So that means million babies were killed. And the thing is, abortion is illegal, and that's happening in the country. So, I mean, from us Christians' point of view, as very serious issue. Now, next one, social justice. This has some gray area, and even within the Christian communities, there are very different views regarding social justice, including the political participation of believers. How far can you go as a believer when you have the regime or the government that is against God or against its own constitution? See, today we hear the news about Iran and Nepal. Some of these countries going through what we had gone in Korea in past history. And these political turmoil or revolt by citizens, civilians, happen. And in case of Korea, the center of in this so-called citizens' revolution, many were Christians. And so when you face, I was a university student when we went through these political turmoil in 79, 80, and so on. And it becomes a very personal decision and issue to make that decision on these social political issues. So you, as a Christian, will also face these social justice issues, which is labeled as ethical, but it also becomes your personal decision whether to go against the government or remain silent or go with the government that is evil. So that's a very complex and serious issue that you may face someday. And if you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's all like domains of the attacks or controversies that we need to face when you are doing apologetics. This, again, not only applies to Christians, Christian apologetics, whatever the faith, the belief that you have, and ideology that you believe, because some of the countries that the religion is not promoted, even though the Constitution says that we have religious freedom, yet in reality it is not. And then you as a non-believer or believer in certain particular ideology and a certain religion also need to defend why your belief, your conviction is correct and true. So this is a very personal thing. I mean, even if you are not so engaged in Christian apologetics, yet you as a person, as a human being, you need to defend your own belief. In a way, it makes sense to you yourself. You need to convince yourself first. And if you cannot convince yourself on the belief that you think you believe, then you are not believing in it. So you need to affirm your own belief, then you can argue with others why your belief is correct and true. So that's kind of the thing that we are trying to struggle with and learn. Okay. So that will conclude the lesson 1, and let's go to lesson 2. Continue. Okay, need for apologetics, let's try to go through that. So why do we need apologetics? Some of the topics that I've already presented to you in the lesson 1. So if it overlaps, I will fast on that. This is what the Pascal, the philosopher, said. Man despises religion. They hate it and are afraid it may be true. The cure for this is first to show that religion is not contrary to reason, but worthy of reverence and respect. The key concept here is religion is not contrary or against reason. So religion, I mean, if it's a religion, I do not want to use the religion in the spirituality language, but let's say for the sake of discussion. Religion is in your heart, but the reason is up there. Again, if the reason and your religion goes against one another, then you need to find a way to complement or balance and harmonize that. But Pascal is saying it cannot, I mean, it should go along side by side. And your heart and your knowledge, your brain should agree and in harmony. And also he suggests some believe their religion, very afraid of it. Yeah, what if it is true? What if there is heaven and hell after this life? Many today's young people do not believe in afterlife because their mind is so natural science. They believe in natural science. That's a belief as well. So their belief is secularism and natural science and sometimes political ideology, and they deny religion. But the question, what if there's a slight 1% possibility that there's a heaven and hell after this one? Then 1% possibility is a very serious one, because there's no like a 1% possibility, but 100% either this is true or 100% that is true. Because they both say there's no God, there's no heaven and hell after this life. And one says there is God, and then there's heaven and hell after this life. So we need to make that decision. That's what Pascal is saying. So people are to ask themselves. He continues saying, next, make it attractive, make a good man wish it were true, and then show that it is worthy of reverence because it really understands human nature, attractive because it promises true good. So no good religion teaches evil, period. No good religion teaches evil. Whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, Buddhism, any good religion, Judaism, think of it. They do not teach evil. They teach us to be good, humanly, personally, and it's universal. They agree. Buddhism and Christianity agrees in many points, many teachings, many principles, because it is about human existence and it's human to be good. So it's not about, so it comes down to the whether it's true or not, but higher level argument would be every apologetic argument comes down to whether it's good or whether it's evil. So from this regard, all the good religions teach good against evil. That's my folder. Well, what do you need? Sign later at the end of class. Okay. This is the name Grut. If you're the student of seminary, and then you will come across this name, because there is a big scholar in the what we call systematic theology. And this is what he said. The word apologetics is often used today in a derogatory way to mean a biased and belligerent advocacy of an indefensible position. I mean, he used big words, but what basically he's saying is, apologetic is the word, the Christians try to defend something that you cannot be defended. That's how the people understand apology. Because the apology, the word apology in English language today is saying I'm sorry, right? So people kind of have that nuance, understanding that Christians saying I'm sorry, but and that's not how we do it. Actually, it's saying you should be sorry if you know what the truth is. So that's what the Grut is trying to say. Yet the idea of presenting a credible apology for a legitimate position or viewpoint has a long and rich history. So he's saying it's been there since the Christian, or even before, because Old Testament, the Judaism, they had the way of doing apologetics in the Old Testament time as well. But if you just begin counting the Christianity since the ministry of Jesus Christ, I mean, Jesus Christ himself was a good the apologetician, meaning he defended his faith while he was doing his own ministry. So we can say it began with Christ himself. So it has a history, 2,000 plus years of history, and the Grotius saying it's been long there. It's not something new, and it's not something to be sorry about. Here's what the Luke, the disciples, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. This is the writing by the Luke, the disciple, in his book, the Gospel. And he's saying, okay, you can say whatever you want to say, and you can attack us. But he's saying, this is what I know and what I believe, because I've seen it. The best apologetic is experiential. I'm not so much sure about the spelling, but experiential, meaning you have your own experience yourself, And no one can fight against that experience. So that's experience. For example, okay, we have here those who are married and those who are not married. Let's say, those who are not married, never married, and single can talk about their marriage. But they cannot win against those who have been married and lived that life of marriage. And because those who are married have been there, and those who are not married, they never been there. They only heard by someone talking about marriage. So there are two different argument positions, and those who have experience have much better position than those who have never experienced. So that's the position of Christians in doing apologetics. Christians are the ones who have been there, who have experienced the existence of God and the mercy of God, the saving grace of God, and all these things throughout their life. And those who are arguing against have never experienced that. So our experiential position is at the different level. So Luke is saying, I've seen it. I have experienced it. I know who Jesus is. I lived with him. So it's my word against yours. So that's basically what the Luke is saying. And he also tells, because of that, I'm telling the truth, and I have obligation to tell the truth. So there are another aspect of why do we do the apologetics? Because it's an obligation. We have responsibility and duty as a believer to defend and explain our own faith when we are asked or attacked or questioned. So that's what the Luke is saying, and if you're a Christian, it's your responsibility and duty as a believer to do so. He continues saying, with this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. So that's at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, he begins by saying this. So again, he's saying, I'm the witness. I'm trying to explain in orderly manner, in another language, systematic, organized way. I'm going to present the Christian truth to you, so you may confirm and affirm and examine what you know already, what you believe already. So that's what we do in this class, and that's why you need to learn and study apologetics, especially if you're a Christian. Purpose. When you investigate these are some of the words that explains what drives you to be who you are. Each may have different reason, motive, intention for doing such things. For example, you come to this class. I know there are different reasons for you to come in this class and sit here and try to sign out when you go out. Some of us need to be here to sustain your legal status. Some of you just want to learn what the subject is telling you, and so on. So the reason, I mean, when you make a decision in your life, and we are faced with many decisions every day, whether it's a small decision or big decision, and every decision that you are making as a person, as a human being, has to do with reason, motive, and intention. For animals, as instinct, as born with, as programmed. But us human beings, God did not program reason, motive, and intention, but you are to develop, create your own motive and reason, intention. So that's the difference between human beings and other animals. Of course, animals do have a certain level of intention and reason. I mean, the little bit more intellectual animals like a dog or cats, they do have a slight level of these things. But basically saying animals do exist by their instinct or instinct of survival. Of course, human beings do have instinct of survival. We want to survive, we want to live, but there's higher reason than survival instinct. And that's called these things. And if you put that in one big word, it could be purpose. So if I ask you today, what is the purpose of your existence? And then you ought to have answers to that question. So that some may look more, how to say, more precious. Some may look not so precious, but each person do have the purpose in his or her own life. Now the problem and issue, if you don't have the D reason, one big great reason for your existence, the purpose, then you are in trouble. I mean, at this age, you should. If you're older than 18, and if you don't have the purpose in your life, that suggests a big issue and problem, at least for me. And so, anything you do should come within that purpose, and if it's not in agreement with that purpose, then you are wasting your time and energy and money. So it is very important to set purpose, whether it's good or bad. I mean, you may not know whether it's good or bad. Still, you need to have a certain purpose. Okay, thank you for coming, and today you need to sign out, and please do so. See you next week.